Hello and welcome. You're watching View on World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour. Now, the Taliban has expressed some strong condemnation for the suicide bombing inside of a mosque in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. At least about 5 people, including a top cleric known as the spiritual father of Taliban, have been killed in the attack. Hamas urges for international community to put pressure on the state of Israel to start the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire. The first phase of the ceasefire ends on Saturday with talks on the next phase underway in Cairo. And nearly about 300,000 people staged protests in Athens on the second anniversary of Greece's worst train tragedy. Youth with petrol bombs clashed with the police, who resorted to firing tear gas shells. Now, the Indian Army, the National Disaster Response Force, and also the Border Police forces carry out operations to rescue about 47 road construction workers trapped underneath an avalanche. In Chamoli in Uttarakhand, 16 of the 57 workers are reportedly rescued. And the Indian economy grows to about 6.2% in real terms during the October-December quarter of the current financial year 2024-25, higher than the 5.6% that was recorded in the July to September quarter. It, however, has fallen short of the Reserve Bank of India's forecast of 6.8%.
Over 57 Border Roads Organization workers feared trapped after avalanche hits a village in India's Chamoli district in Uttarakhand state. The incident took place 3 kilometers from Badrinath Dham, where the workers were engaged in road construction. 16 have been rescued. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the European Union agreed to push for the conclusion of a free trade pact this year. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
Rather unfortunate news coming up first from India. More than 40 people are feared trapped after a glacier burst triggered an avalanche in India's Uttarakhand state. The incident took place near the Mana village in the Chamoli district. According to initial reports, 57 workers were buried in the avalanche. Out of these workers, at least 10 workers have been rescued and sent to the army camp near Mana for treatment. The avalanche hit just a few kilometers from the famous Hindu shrine, the Badrinath temple. The Uttarakhand police spokesperson IG Nilesh Anand Bharne said that the avalanche occurred near the Border Roads Organization camp in the border area of Mana village. 57 workers engaged in road construction were trapped. Teams from the National and State Disaster Response Forces are present on the spot. The Indo-Tibetan Border Police, the ITBP, and Border Roads Organization BRO teams are also part of the rescue efforts.
तो हमने आईटीबीपी की भी जो टेक्निकल टीम है ओली से भी और सुनील से भी वहां मोबिलाइज कर दी है। उसके अलावा हमारी आईटीबी की एक पोस्ट भी वहां पे है माणा में, तो वो लोग भी सबके सब, बल्कि जो ये 10 लोग निकाले हैं तो आईटीबीपी के ही उसमें फोर्सेज ने निकाले हैं। उसके अलावा हमारी एसडीआरएफ की टुकड़ी वो भी अभी वहां पे पहुंचने वाली है। तो पूरे हर तरफ से जाकर के हमने अपने हेलीकॉप्टर्स को भी स्टैंड बाई रखा हुआ है और दिल्ली भी हमने जेएस एयर से जाकर के स्टैंड बाई हेलीकॉप्टर्स की उसकी हमने कर रखी है। तो पूरे जोर शोर से पूरा रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन चल रहा है अभी।
Chief Minister Singh Dhami expressed sadness at the accident. He said that he was praying for the well-being of those trapped.
PRO के हमारे 57 श्रमिक उसमें फंसे थे और एवलांच आने से इसमें से 16 को सुरक्षित निकाल लिया गया है। बाकी के लिए सभी प्रयास चल रहे हैं, सभी प्रकार की तैयारियां यहाँ पर कर ली गई हैं। एम्बुलेंस से लेकर ITBP की मदद ली जा रही है, अन्य संस्थाओं की मदद ली जा रही है। आपदा प्रबंधन विभाग हमारा पूरी तरह से सक्रिय, जिला प्रशासन भी और हम लोग स्वयं सभी लोग लगातार संपर्क में हैं और हमारा प्रयास है कि सभी को सुरक्षित जल्दी से जल्दी बाहर निकालें।
False alarm. Dozens of deaths and hundreds of cases which sparked panic in Congo's Equator province have been attributed to malaria. Initial suspicions had pointed to a mystery disease. Dr. Ngashi Ngongo from the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention mentioned in an online briefing that tests are primarily indicating malaria.
The symptomatology of that disease in the Equatorial region is very much similar to what happened in Panzi last year. And it's almost the same trend, that there were investigations that covered almost everything, Marburg and Ebola, but at the end, it turned up to be malaria. Now, what does that mean? It's exactly where this whole thing is also heading with the Basankuso, as I said. Of the 70 tests that were run with the blood smears, about 78 of them tested positive for malaria. The rapid test is about 55% of them that tested positive for malaria.
Africa's leading public health organization reported that infections have been found in 5 villages and is exploring whether water or food sources might be contributing to the illnesses alongside flu and typhoid. The World Health Organization has acknowledged the prevalence of malaria in Congo's Equator province, but has not dismissed other potential causes. The UN Health Agency indicated that it remains uncertain whether the outbreaks are interconnected.
A Eli la conocí en agosto de 2016, cuando me enteré que habían eutanasiado a su compañera asiática Maggie. Vine a verla y pues me conmovió mucho ver en qué estado estaba y le hice una promesa a Eli. Me paré frente a ella, la miré a los ojos y le dije, a ti no te van a hacer lo mismo. Aunque no sea científica y no tenga el conocimiento, estaba desolada, triste, apática. Yo la sentía abandonada. ¿Es previsible la conducta? Muchos activistas dicen, los animales no tienen voz. Yo difiero con eso. Sí la tienen, pero no queremos escucharlos. Lo que se pide con ese fallo es que Eli tenga los mejores cuidados posibles y permanentes.
Aprobado con esa mayoría de 3 votos.
Su fuerza, su fortaleza de resistir, de haber aguantado 25 años en el circo desde temprana edad y de estar aguantando el cautiverio en las condiciones que vivía, es una enseñanza de vida.
In other climate news, at least one person has died as wildfire continued to spread near Japan's northeastern coastal city of Ufanato. Firefighters have been struggling to contain the blaze, which started on Wednesday afternoon, destroying at least 84 houses. It has also forced evacuation of as many as 3,300 people. Japanese defense minister said that the country's self-defense force has been deployed to extinguish the fire. Local police and firefighters are searching for people who may have been injured. They have warned that the damaged area may continue to expand.
Satellite images taken of the area on Thursday showed the effects of the wildfire. The images captured by US satellite company Maxar Technologies showed burnt homes and buildings surrounded by billowing smoke.
Pretty big blast during the Friday prayers in the afternoon has killed at least about 5 people and injured 20 others at a mosque in Pakistani town of Akora in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The suicide blast reportedly killed Maulana Hamidul Haq, a JUIF leader, and the son of Maulana Samiul Haq, who was once known as the spiritual guardian of the Afghan Taliban, particularly of the Haqqani network. The sources say that Maulana Hamidul Haq was the primary target of the blast. Officials have further said that the police is investigating the explosion and the dead and the wounded are being transported to hospitals. No group has claimed responsibility so far for the attack. Now, the bombing came ahead of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan that is expected to start either this evening or on Sunday, subject to the sighting of the moon. And our Pakistan Bureau Chief Anas Malik is joining us with more updates on this. Anas, what's the latest on the story?
As the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government has declared the bombing as a suicide attack, saying that this particular attack was targeted at Maulana Hamidul Haq Haqqani, who is the son of Maulana Samiul Haq, and he has succumbed to the wounds. What we know so far is that 5 people have been confirmed killed, another 16 have been injured in this particular act of terror. Now, Haqqani, the Darul Ulum al-Haqqaniya in Akora Khatak, is something that is seen as a spiritual foundry for the Afghan Taliban, and we would be seeing that the Afghan Taliban's comments with regards to this particular killing. It is also pertinent to mention the fact that Maulana Hamidul Haq Haqqani was very recently threatened by the ISK for his staunch critique against the organization.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Anas Malik, for joining us with those details there. The United States has terminated thousands of life-saving grants globally, including the HIV, malaria and humanitarian aid projects. The PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS-funded HIV organizations in South Africa, and other grants to hundreds of Africans and HIV groups providing life-saving services have been terminated with immediate effect. This has now sent shockwaves around the global health community. In January, President Donald Trump announced an executive order to freeze all foreign aid for a 90-day pause to assess whether projects were consistent with his policy aims. Now, in the hours after the Trump administration announced that it was cutting down some $60 billion in funding, termination letters arrived at NGOs across the world. The letters said that programs providing life-saving assistance against hunger and disease and performing other humanitarian work were being ended. The letters further said that the programs were being defunded for convenience and the interest of the US government. Major United Nations health programs were amongst those to get termination notices, including UNAIDS, the Stop TB Partnership, and Scaling Up Nutrition, as well as projects helping displaced people. In South Africa, all 44 South African HIV programs through US aid have been terminated. South Africa has the highest burden of HIV in the world, with 8 million people living with virus. It runs the biggest HIV program in the world, providing treatment to about 5.5 million people. An alliance of health groups has said that the cuts are a crisis and people will die. The head of the leading Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, Linda Gale, said that a halt in the US funds to South Africa HIV/AIDS programs could lead to potentially more than 500,000 deaths over a span of 10 years. Our correspondent Calvin Ongmu has sent us this report from Johannesburg. Listen in.
Hundreds and thousands of lives are at stake after the Trump administration pulled its plug on contracts of some 10,000 projects receiving US aid grants globally. In South Africa, health experts have expressed major concerns. A doctor from Anova Health Institute in South Africa, which delivers HIV services to hard-to-reach groups, said this is one of the worst days of a professional life. She added that on Friday, they have to let go of 2,800 people from their jobs who are mainly peer educators and data capturers. A person living with HIV expressed fear and questioned on what is going to happen to the treatment from here on and how is she going to survive. Some experts have said South Africa is still at a much better place as compared to many other African countries. South Africa derives only 17% of its HIV budget from PEPFAR, while the Democratic Republic of Congo gets 89% of its HIV budget from PEPFAR, and Mozambique and Tanzania get 60% of the HIV budget from the US. This is Golden Ormo from Johannesburg, South Africa for WION World is One.
Lawmakers voted to remove protections for gender identity from the Civil Rights Code. The change would also list sex as male and female only. Critics say it could expose transgender people to discrimination. One protester had to be removed from the State House yesterday during the vote. Iowa's governor still has to approve this change.
This morning, a deal is reached to end a strike by workers at New York State prisons. Corrections officers and sergeants have been illegally striking for nearly 2 weeks. Christina Fan joins us live from the Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Westchester County, one of the affected prisons. Christina.
Good morning, Mary. This tentative deal addresses several of the correction officers' demands, including staffing shortages and also worker safety. For more than a week now, correction officers were seen picketing right behind us, protesting their working conditions and refusing to report for duty at 36 of the state's 42 prisons. In response, Governor Hochul deployed thousands of National Guard members to maintain general order. 2 inmates at Sing Sing died during the strike, but it's unclear if prison staffing played a role. Thursday evening, after 4 days of mediation, Governor Hochul announced that both sides finally struck a deal, writing, quote, "We have reached a consent award to address many of the concerns raised by correction officers, put DOCCS back on the path to safe operations, respect the rights of incarcerated individuals, and prevent future unsanctioned work stoppages." Strikers want several key concessions, including a temporary bump in overtime pay, a potential change in pay scale, and the suspension of a prison reform law that limited the use of solitary confinement. The ongoing strike was in violation of a state law barring strikes by most public employees. Now, according to the mediator, employees must return to work by Saturday at the latest to avoid any kind of disciplinary action. Reporting live.
A display of planets will appear in the night sky tonight, a spectacle that won't be seen again for another 15 years. Ollie Haig joins us live from the planetarium. Ollie, what are we looking out for?
Well, Tom, it's been described as a rare planetary parade. Now, what will happen is if you look up at the evening sky just after sunset at about 8 o'clock, you should be able to see about 7 planets. They'll be spread apart in an arc shape, and 5 of them, incredibly, you'll be able to see with the naked eye. Now, those 5 planets are Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus and Mercury. The other 2 you will need binoculars for, but we are being told that they'll look like twinkling stars, and some will even have a specific colour.
You'll have Jupiter shining brightly right up the top of the sky, along with Mars shining nice and red, also high in the sky as well. But the other 3, you'll have to look right towards the western horizon to catch them.
Now, Tom, as you mentioned off the top there, this is the last time that you'll see a 7-planet alignment until the 2040s. So certainly something that you wouldn't want to miss. Tom.
Enjoy the spectacle. Ollie, thank you.
880 employees of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration were laid off yesterday, including some meteorologists. NOAA has monitored the U.S. weather and climate since 1970.
Yeah, the agency also steps in during severe weather emergencies. WFL meteorologist Peyton Malone joins us now to explain more about the agency, what it does, and specifically what they do in terms of what you do, Peyton.
Yeah, you know, we were talking last hour, guys, about how important NOAA is for everything. I mean, from forecasts, but beyond that, we were talking about their advancements in hurricane modeling and how that's helped us the past couple of years really predict accurately rapid intensifying hurricanes. In this segment, I wanted to talk more about the forecasting and how important what they do is to create the forecast. We launch weather balloons across the United States. In fact, there's about 92 different locations that launch these weather balloons. Why are they important? Well, weather balloons are launched to gather data from the surface going up tens of thousands of miles, and we use that data from the balloons to plug it into models. In some instances, when NOAA and the National Weather Service becomes understaffed and there's less people or funding to do these weather balloons, we start to lose data. Therefore, we start to lose the accuracy in the models. And so it's so important. And yesterday it was announced, regardless of, I don't know if it's because of the layoffs, but there was one Weather Service office in Alaska that is stopping these weather balloon launches because they don't have enough resources for it. And that takes away a little piece of the puzzle to create data. And why is it important? Well, Alaska is our first instance of us sampling these weather systems that are coming into the U.S. So all these different things, there's so many different factors that NOAA is involved in, whether it be the actual forecasting or the researchers who create the tools to create the forecast, such as the models. All of these things go into what we do every day. And regardless of whether you watch people on YouTube give the weather, here on Channel 4, we could not give you any amount of valuable information without what NOAA is supplying us, and all that data that they give us is how we create the forecast, guys.
Peyton, to be clear here, still working to figure out exactly who was cut and where. The Advocate, Times-Picayune, there, NOLA.com reporting this morning that we're not seeing any cuts locally, at least right now in this first round of phases. But what are the questions you have this morning going forward, considering that this is so vital to what you do specifically?
I think it's the future of the Weather Service, and does this hamper their ability to innovate? And because we know forecasting has changed so much, not only in the past 10 years, but in the past 5 years, the advancements we have seen. Does this stop? Does it continue at this same rate? We don't know yet, but it's so important because weather forecasting is a constantly evolving and a difficult thing. It's a lot more than just looking at that little information on your app. Guess where all that information on that app you look at comes from? The National Weather Service. So without that information, we just don't know what the effects will be long term.
And I know we're wrapping this up, but it's also what I've seen with you in working with, you know, the organization. You're not just reading data and then reverbing it to us in a way we understand. You guys often have discussions about things and figuring out how you can predict something.
Yeah, and you know, the Weather Service, we're not just getting their information from forecasters, we're using all that raw information that the forecasters from the National Weather Service use too. So it goes just beyond the simple fact of here's my forecast. It's all the things that lead up to creating that forecast, which NOAA, it's vital for.
Mr. President, you talked about having common ground with Keir Starmer, but there are things you disagree on as well. You described Zelensky as a dictator. He describes President Putin as a dictator. Do you see that as a problem?
The relationship between President Zelensky and President Putin is not a good one. You've noticed, right? It's not a good one. It's not a good relationship. And we're going to have to try and work something out. Sometimes that happens. I get along with both. I have a very good relationship with President Putin. I think I have a very good relationship with President Zelensky. And now we're doing the deal, and we're going to be in there. We're going to be actually in there and digging our hearts out. And hopefully, we need the rare earth, and we have some here, but we don't have enough. Our economy is very strong, and we need a lot of things that, in some cases, we don't have here. So. I think we're going to have a very good relationship, but the relationship between them is not the best.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
Just going to play you Albanese talking about how much notice he had about the Chinese warships.
Well, China issued, in accordance with practice, an alert that it would be conducting these activities, including the potential use of live fire. It is the case that the notice was given. When that occurs, airlines are notified and stay out of the area. Air Services Australia also has been informed.
So Barnaby, were the government, the Labor Party, Albanese and co, caught with their pants down?
The only thing that was consistent about that statement from the current Prime Minister, it was all wrong. It was all false. And no, they weren't notified. We found out because a Virgin airline saw the live fire and then contacted, we didn't even have an Australian warship there, contacted a New Zealand warship, which then conveyed it back to the Defence Force. The Virgin Airlines conveyed it to Air Services Australia. And this was brought about the diversion, I think, of 49 flights, because it's not safe to fly over a place that's firing missiles and ordnances into the air. It was a complete and utter debacle. And then the Prime Minister blurts out that stuff that he was informed, it was a proper process. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It just wasn't. And it's a real wake-up call to Australia. That was a real, the Chinese Communist Party saying, hello, Australia, be really careful of how you act around us. We're the big boys in the block, and we should just focus on one thing in this nation, and it's not intermittent power, and it's not gender equality, and it's not gender fluidity. It's becoming as powerful as possible, as quickly as possible, so your children are safe. Because if you get this wrong, forget about welcome to country. There's no country to welcome to. You don't own it anymore.
Absolutely.
Forget about your nice house in the eastern suburbs. It's not your house anymore. Forget about your super. It's gone. Forget about your children. They could be dead, or there's no future for them. Focus on that. Focus on that. Really focus on that.
Pauline, very quickly, you've been warning about the threat of China for years. Did you ever think you would see a Chinese warship off Sydney firing ammunition?
Well, I didn't think it would happen so soon, but Rowan, I'll tell you this, they're testing the waters, and the fact is to see what Australia would do about it. If Australian ships were up in Chinese waters, they would actually have their fighter bombers going over the top of them and seeing what we're up to. This is not on. They're circumnavigating Australia, what I understand. Has the Prime Minister told us that? Not to be concerned about it. He wouldn't know what the hell's going on in his own backyard. His Chinese mates never told him that they were going to come down in our waters. He had no idea, and he kowtows to them all the time. And we're going to pay the price for that.
Absolutely. Thank you both, Pauline, Hans.
Terrorist has rammed into a group of Israeli civilians, injuring many. He then got out and started stabbing people with a screwdriver. IDF veteran Yoav Rotem joins us now with the breaking details. Yoav, what can you tell us?
Shalom, Raj. So this past afternoon in Israel, the northern part of Israel, next to what's called Pardes Chana Junction, an Arab terrorist used an easy weapon, unfortunately, a car that he was driving, running into a bus station or a place where there was some people standing by the road. 10 were injured, one severely critical condition, a girl 17 years old. After that, he was driving towards the police over there and got off the car and tried to attack them with the screw, as you mentioned. The interesting part is the identity of this person. This person is he's a Palestinian Arab who is illegally staying in Israel for years, apparently, because he married to an Israeli Arab lady. The difference between these two is very interesting. We have part of the Israeli population, 21% Arabs in Israel, equal civilians. But in the West Bank, we have Arabs that are not Israeli civilians, and as for now, they cannot go into Israel. They need permits, and they barely can get permits since October 7th. This guy has kids that are Israeli, and he's 53 years old, and he decided to to commit a terror attack. This is a very unfortunate situation and very sad, and actually it's part of propaganda probably that is happening.
Well, yeah, that's my question is someone who does something like this, uses their car to ram into civilians, then reaches for a screwdriver to start stabbing the first Jew he sees. He has to know this is a suicide mission. He's not going to survive this. So obviously you can't, look into his mind, but what drives someone to do something like this?
There's many research about it, and there were different kind of waves of violence that happen, unfortunately, in my country here in Israel. But this kind of age, specifically from what I know and I remember from former cases, is people that are motivated by propaganda, hatred against Jews. The trigger can come from something upsetting that happened to him either the same day or something before, something in business, something with the authorities, something. But definitely it's aimed towards a specific population. He knew where they are, and obviously trying to attack the policemen as representatives of the state of Israel is something that there's something here behind. I mean, there's agenda, there's propaganda that is always trying to develop hatred towards the Jews. You can find it all over the media and the web, and maybe he was exposed to it.
So here's the question, Yoav. You mentioned that 21% of Israelis are Arabs. So how do Israelis see these attacks? You talk about the bus stations that the buses that blew up last week, where that could have been dozens of people killed had they set them off at the right time. How do Israelis separate this continued attacks and also not foster hatred towards the Arab people? It seems like, from what I've experienced, I've been to Israel dozens of times, and this is just my personal experience. I don't meet many Israelis who would say I hate Arabs. In fact, I've never met one. So how do Israelis separate those things?
Oof, that's hard. It's a very deep discussion that you're bringing up over here, especially after October 7th with the Gaza people. And you do hear some anger and hatred lately, especially because of these atrocities that happens. But I think it's coming from education and a mature level that we are a democracy and our neighbors living next to us can be Arabs, and they can be good people, and they're equal citizens to us. So developing hatred is something that doesn't help. And not just doesn't help, it's not part of the values or the core values of Israel. And unfortunately, we do find here and there things like that because, since I remember myself, and I'm a product of the 80s, but even people who were born in the 70s, we've had these attacks, terror attacks here in Israel, either by stabbings or even suicide bombers during the Second Intifada and even before and after. I think the energy should go how to prevent it. And if it's security, a lot of effort in security, the security fence that helps a lot to prevent from terrorists just to step into Israel and explode. And there's a huge effort, and we trust our security bodies with intelligence to stop these events. How do we don't develop hatred? It's hard. I don't know. It's a hard question.
Well, I've been to your house many times, and you're right. And I think for people that have never been over there, they don't realize that Jews and Arabs in the state of Israel live literally next door to each other. 20%, was it 2.1 million, something like that? Israeli, citizens, not Palestinians, that live in the West Bank or Judea-Samaria, Gaza. They are citizens of the state of Israel, and so it's not what you would think from the news reports that you see from different organizations. You go there, and there's this one city, Abu Ghosh, for example, on the way to Jerusalem, and there's Jewish people and Arab people, and you can't really tell which houses are different, and it's all just one kind of big mix. So I think the solution is complicated because it's so interwoven of who's who, what's what. But as for today, we are praying for your country. We're praying that everyone recovers from this attack. And Yoav, you are a dear friend, and we're we're hoping this kind of thing doesn't happen again. And we wanted you to know that we're here to support you, my friend.
We can't wait to see you, Raj. Thank you again.
God bless.
All is not well between Israel and Egypt. The outgoing IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, has voiced concerns over the strength of the Egyptian military. Halevi has cited Egypt's advanced weaponry and sizable forces to support his concerns. In an interview to the Israeli Channel 14, Halevi has said, and I quote him here, "We are very worried about this. Egypt has a large army equipped with advanced combat systems, aircraft, submarines, warships and modern tanks, along with a vast number of infantry troops." Halevi said that Egypt does not currently pose a threat. However, he's warned that the situation can change in an instant with a shift in leadership. Now, Halevi's comments have come in the backdrop of reports that say that Egypt is changing its military deployments in the Sinai Peninsula. Satellite images are indicating a repositioning of the Egyptian troops that have caused significant worry amongst the IDF border establishments. The report suggests that the IDF security and military institutions have obtained testimonies indicating that Egypt is allegedly repositioning its forces in Sinai in violation of the 1979 Camp David Accords. The treaty divides the Sinai into 3 zones, restricting military presence in certain areas. Experts say that if the reports are to be believed, then the recent modifications allow the Egyptian forces to be deployed in previously demilitarized zones. The IDF has also acknowledged recently the smuggling of long-range weapons into Israel via drones. Israel believes that these weapons previously had made their way from Sinai to Hamas-held Gaza. However, now the IDF is deployed along the Philadelphia corridor on Gaza's border with Egypt. Now, this, the Israelis say, has resulted in the emergence of an alternate modus operandi for transporting weapons. On the Israeli side, the smugglers are waiting on high-speed ATVs and vanish within seconds. Now, this is a relatively new smuggling route that the Israeli authorities are still trying to work on to trace the destination of the weapons.